As the Nazis attempted to eradicate the Jewish people from every corner of Europe, one country's Jewish population actually grew, thanks to the tireless efforts of Metropolitan Stefan of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church and Messianic Jewish Rabbi Daniel Zion. Our guests today, Avi Mizrachi and his daughter Devorah, discovered in the process of researching their ancestry that their family has a personal connection to Daniel Zion. Stay tuned for the inside story of the rabbi who helped save Bulgarian Jews from the Holocaust.
Put your hand in mine together. We will walk in harmony. Let me introduce you to my teacher, the rabbi from the Galilee.
You're listening to Messiah Podcast, where Jesus is Jewish, and that changes everything. Messiah Podcast is a production of First Fruits of Zion. Well, welcome back to Messiah Podcast. I'm here with Judy Abrams from the Brahms Center for Messianic Jewish Learning in Jerusalem, in Israel. How you doing, Judy?
Hey, doing great. It's a beautiful day here and just enjoying some nice Jerusalem weather today. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. It's raining here. It's terrible. I mean, we thank God for the rain, but ain't going outside today. I'm staying in. So you have brought our guest to us today. I think this is somebody that you know. This is a family that you are acquainted with. And they just have a fascinating story that relates to the Holocaust and this enigmatic figure, this Rabbi Daniel Zion. I think it's actually supposed to be Daniel Zion, but for those of us who are not no speaky the Hebrew so good, I'm just going to say Daniel Zion. So I'm going to leave it to you to go ahead and introduce our guest, if you would, please.
Awesome. Yes. Today we have our incredible guest here, Avi Mizrachi and his daughter Devorah. They've come to join us for this podcast. We're so blessed to have you guys here. And the work that they're doing, I mean, let's see. I've known Devorah for years, since I was a teenager. Actually, we attended different conferences in the U.S. together and had some family connections. And it's so fun to get to be here in Israel with her now and be able to see her. Actually, recently we had a women's conference that her mom put on, and there were hundreds of believers who came from all over the country. It was such a blessed time of fellowship and learning together. And Avi runs Dugit Ministries, a beautiful ministry based out of the center of the country, out of the Tel Aviv area. And they have a coffee shop for sharing the gospel and a prayer tower, and leads the congregation as well, called Adonai Roi. And if you guys want to hear more about the ministry that they're doing here in Israel, you can check out their website. We'll link it for you in the description to the podcast, but it's www.dugit.org. Yeah, we really appreciate having both of you guys here for the podcast.
Thank you for having us. We're very honored and privileged.
Yeah, we are very happy.
Well, the fruits, at least some of the fruits of your research, I'm holding in my hand right now. The book is called Legacy of Hope, Hidden Heroes from Generation to Generation. And just broadly speaking, we're going to get into all the details in this podcast. However, can you briefly introduce the main idea of the book? What is the book about? And how is it that the Bulgarian Jews were spared the worst horrors of the Holocaust?
When the Nazis, of course, came to power in Germany, and then they made in the Wannsee Agreement that every country in Europe will give their Jews. So Bulgaria signed that they will give their 50,000 Jews to Hitler. And when the Nazis came to Bulgaria, they start collecting the names, start collecting everything, and pushing their laws. They sent the trains to pick up the Jews from Bulgaria. And somehow, by the grace of God and the miracle of God, those trains went back to Hitler empty. And this happened 3 times. And you ask yourself, how did this happen? What a miracle. How come those Jews were not killed in Auschwitz? And that's where really the story comes, is that God did a miracle using a Jewish rabbi, Daniel Zion, the chief rabbi of Bulgaria, who became a believer in Yeshua. And this Metropolitan, this bishop of the Orthodox Church, Stefan, also who loved God, loved the Bible, and loved Israel. And together, hand in hand, decided to work together. They stood against the evil one in faith, willing to lay their lives down. And by doing that, 50,000 Jews were saved from being murdered by the Nazis.
Thank God.
Yeah, thank God. And of course, the fruit of that today is your family here in Israel. Something that you guys share during this book is the personal story of your family intertwined with the historical story, which is just really, really amazing. And it sounds like the connection between the Mizrachi family and the Zion, Daniel Zion's family dates back a few kind of generations. Give us a little bit of history around this. How did this connection begin and develop?
Where it really started is when Rabbi Daniel Zion was asked from Thessaloniki to move to Bulgaria in 1915. And so my family was in Bulgaria, in Sofia. And later on, also, Rabbi Zion became the head of the rabbinical court in Bulgaria, giving him the moral status of chief rabbi. And he was head of the synagogue in Sofia that we mentioned before. And my family was part of that synagogue.
Wow.
So my great-grandfather, Avi Mizrachi, was a member of the synagogue of Rabbi Daniel Zion before World War II and in World War II. And also another family connection is that my grandfather, Nisi Mizrachi, who was only a teen during World War II, he was 11 when World War II broke out, he was studying with Rabbi Daniel Zion for his bar mitzvah.
Wow.
And was learning all the prayers. And there was a real connection between the Zion family and the Mizrachi family. Because one of the things that Rabbi Zion really did is that he really took care of the poor. He really had a heart for the poor and taking care of them. And my family was a family of 6 boys. And my great-grandfather also passed away during the years of the Holocaust. So my great-grandmother was a widower. We know that the Zion family provided my family with food so they could survive those years in the war because there was a hunger in my family. And they didn't have enough food. So, and he didn't have a lot. His family didn't have a lot. But the little that he had, he gave away to the poor families. And one of those families was my family.
Gosh.
And so you see throughout our book that intertwining that you talk about, because it's right from the beginning, from before World War II, throughout World War II, you see how also my grandfather interacts with Rabbi Daniel Zion himself. Mm-hmm. What's amazing is that also later, when my family immigrates to Israel, then they become part of his synagogue here in Israel, in Jaffa.
Yeah.
Wow. What a connection. It's not just a history book about some event that everybody knows about, right? Like most people, including myself, I had no idea about the history of Bulgaria's Jews in World War II before being exposed to the story of Rabbi Daniel Zion and subsequently others who were involved in this miracle in such a dark time in history. And, you know, before we dive into more of the content of the story, it's important for me to thank you guys, all this research and all of the digging deeper that you all accomplished also really helped us write our kind of complementary book on Daniel Zion that we have through First Fruits. And we can't take for granted working together like this, being able to partner and to help each other in different projects. It's really, really beautiful. And so from all of our First Fruits staff, we really want to thank you all for helping us with our, this other book that we have on Daniel Zion that is quite complementary really to what you all have written. So a big thanks on that one.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I'm so grateful. I was just so excited also to hear that First Fruits of Zion was also writing a book because, like I said, my heart is that people know this story. Mm-hmm. It's such a powerful story, and it's so relevant for today. And so I am just so excited. I think there should be more books written about him. Definitely. And I just see this as a start. And so I'm just also very grateful to the partnership that we've had as well.
So my understanding is that Jewish people in Bulgaria were part of the Bulgarian like community. Like there wasn't a lot of friction there. It was a safe place, more or less, for Jewish people to live. And then you get this Hitler guy. He wants all the Jews from everywhere in Europe. He wants to kill everybody, and he's pressuring Bulgaria. And Tsar Boris, who I want to talk about a little bit later, no one knows what he's going to do or what he's thinking. But some of the people putting pressure on him are these two guys, Metropolitan Stefan and Rabbi Daniel Zion. The amazing thing to me about this story is that these guys seem to be buddies. Like they seemed to be friends. Can you elaborate on how did these guys? They seem to be unlikely friends, right?
Yes.
How did they know each other? Like where did this come from?
It's a really amazing story, I think. So to really nail point where they exactly met, I wasn't really able to, but I am able to give you a few sources of different accounts in the beginning years.
Okay.
Metropolitan Stefan is the head of the Orthodox Church in Bulgaria. And we know that also Rabbi Daniel Zion, he is the head of the rabbinical court in status of chief rabbi of Bulgaria. So both were working with the poor and needy in Bulgaria, specifically in Sofia, because that's where both were also stationed. And that was also their passion and their heart. So a lot of the Jewish population was in Sofia, and many of them were also not wealthy Jews. A lot of them were poor Jews. So it was definitely something that Rabbi Daniel Zion really worked on. So we know that there was working together to help the poor. But we also know that because of the city of Sofia, they interacted. And both of them were scholars, and both of them were very intellect. And we know from a number of accounts that they actually got together and they started having theology discussions. And at one point, Metropolitan Stefan decided to give a gift to Rabbi Daniel Zion. It was the whole complete Bible. When I mean the whole complete Bible, I'm meaning also the Tanakh, the Old Testament, with the New Covenant, New Testament. And he gave it as part of their theology discussion.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Daniel Zion, as an Orthodox Jew, saw that. He tore the pages of the New Testament, New Covenant, threw it on the floor, and said, okay, now I'll read your book. And very Jewish.
Spicy. Yeah, very Jewish, very spicy. Yeah.
But I guess he looked at the pages. At this point, Metropolitan Stefan was a friend. And he I think he was convicted and he felt like he was dishonoring his friend. So he decided to pick up the pages by the end of the meeting. And he took the book and he said, okay, I'll put it in my library. How long that book stayed, I don't know exactly, but it did collect some dust.
Yeah.
Something very important happened to Rabbi Daniel Zion. And for my researches, it happened in 1930s. I'm pretty sure it happened around 1934. He has this vision. Rabbi Zion is in the middle of his prayer, morning prayer, of the Shacharit morning prayer. And all of a sudden, he looks up and he sees this glowing, shining man. And then he disappears. And he doesn't know what to do. And as a good Orthodox rabbi, what does he first do? He goes and he asks his other fellow rabbis, what is this? And they couldn't answer him. They had no idea. So he wasn't happy with that answer. And he decided, okay, let me go see with my other friends. So he ended up talking to Metropolitan Stefan. And Metropolitan Stefan says, well, how about the next time this glowing person appears before you, just call out and say, here I am, hineni. And for Rabbi Daniel, it seemed pretty Jewish enough. And he said, I can do that. It was good enough for Samuel. It's good enough for me.
There you go.
And he said, okay. And so next time he prays in the morning, he's praying. And all of a sudden, this glowing image person comes in front of him. And he says, hineni, here I am. And the person, this glowing person says, Ani Yeshua. I am Yeshua.
Wow.
And disappears.
Yeah.
And that's when he feels in his heart, it was like, I just saw Yeshua, and he goes to his library and starts reading from the New Testament, and he's seeing how much there are so many verses from the Tanakh, from the Old Testament, from the Jewish writings in the New Testament, and slowly having the revelation that Yeshua is the Messiah. And so then he's with this problem, because again, we're talking about the 1930s. What does he do? Does he convert and become a Christian? Does he convert and become part of the Orthodox Church? He's the chief rabbi of Bulgaria. What is he supposed to do? And this is when he goes to his friend. And I think that this meeting is a very important meeting. I think it's a key meeting, because what Metropolitan Stefan tells his friend, saying, you know what, Rabbi Daniel Zion, don't convert, don't be part of the Orthodox Church, remain the chief rabbi of Bulgaria, remain with your Jewish identity, and see Yeshua as your Messiah.
Wow.
And see, from that point, you see that even before World War II breaks out in Europe, you have two leaders of the country, a leader from the Orthodox Church of the Christians in a nation. And on the other side, you have Chief Rabbi of Bulgaria, who is also a Messianic rabbi who believes in Yeshua, both in strategic places, both leaders in their nation, friends, before even World War II breaks out in 1939. And I believe God orchestrated all this beforehand, because then you enter World War II, and both of these figures were instrumental in saving the lives of 50,000 Jews.
Wow. And we really hear here like about this relationship that was built by loving God and serving people and being involved with the poor of the community. And it seems like they both, from their respective religions, learned about how important that is, right? And then entered into these theological discussions. And like you said, who knows how long that New Testament might have sat on the shelf. But it's special to think that just a half a second where the rabbi was like, wait, I shouldn't disrespect this man who's my friend. He wasn't maybe at the time not even thinking about disrespecting the scriptures, but at that time thought, this person is special enough to me that I want to respect what he believes. What an incredible start to the testimony, right? What we have here.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned, of course, the focus on the book is the Jews of Bulgaria in World War II. Can you give a bit more of a description about what life looked like for Avraham, your grandfather, and Nisim, your father, Avi, before the war?
My family in Bulgaria was Sephardic Jews. So the language that they spoke in the home was actually Ladino, which was Old Spanish and Hebrew. And of course also Bulgarian, but Ladino was the mother tongue in the home. And they would go to the great synagogue, the Sephardic synagogue in Sofia. And one of the things that my family owned and had was a tin shop. My great-grandfather, Avraham, he was very good with his hands, and he was able to do things with metal. So he was able to do like chanukiot in boxes. And I know that from family members who saw his work, he said he would make the most beautiful menorahs and beautiful chanukiot in all of Bulgaria.
Wow.
World War II starts, if I'm not mistaken, in September 1939. And then only a few weeks after that, we have the first anti-Semitic attack done by anti-Semitic groups like Retnik and Baltnik. And these groups were totally take a hold of the Nazi propaganda and anti-Semitism and hatred toward the Jewish people. And they go in, they smash windows, they desecrate areas that are buildings that were Jewish. And one of the things that happened is that my great-grandfather's tin shop was completely destroyed because of that.
Gosh. And so you are starting to see this rise of anti-Semitism coming with the responsiveness to the Nazi propaganda. Wow. And we see, violence following propaganda is not something that we're very foreign to at this point either.
No, what's amazing about Bulgaria is that you pretty much have the same steps that were taken everywhere else in Europe. When it comes to the anti-Semitic attacks, the Nuremberg laws that are the Bulgarian version of the Bill of Defense of the Nation. And you have even concentration camps, you have work camps, you have people taken away from their homes. I mean, you have even places where even Jews are gathered to be deported near the train station. All this happens in Bulgaria, all these steps that happen in other countries. But in Bulgaria, it was revoked or delayed or completely canceled.
Gosh.
For these deportations to happen.
Yeah. Now you mentioned this bill for the defense of the nation. And this is something that was signed off on by Tsar Boris. And it seems to be a huge turning point in history kind of for the Jews of Bulgaria. What changed following this bill, and was your family directly affected by what happened here?
Yes, for sure. So up until the end, you have to understand that also Bulgaria is neutral. It's not part of the alliance with the Third Reich. So you can think that also the Bulgarian Jews are hoping that this war will not come to them.
Sure.
But things are different when all of a sudden this bill is prevalent in Parliament. And it's also passed in January of 1941. And it's pretty much the Bulgarian version of the Nuremberg laws that were in Germany, very anti-Semitic, against Jews. They couldn't have real estate. They couldn't be elected. They couldn't vote. They couldn't be in theaters. They couldn't marry to un-Jewish people. And they're also different organizations had to be completely shut down. One of them was the Zionist youth groups that my grandfather was a part of, Hashomer HaTzair, the Young Guard. They could not gather together anymore. On a personal level, for our family, this is when the tin shop was taken away from my family because Jewish people were not entitled to owning any stores or any real estate. So the only really possible means of income was taken away from our family. And I know it was something very difficult for my great-grandfather. He didn't know how he was going to provide for his family. During this time, there's also, we know testimonies of my grandfather, Nisim, who was a teenager preparing for his bar mitzvah. He was really questioning him being Jewish. He was very proud of being Jewish up until then.
Sure.
But then all these feelings of why did I have to be Jewish? Why do we have to suffer? Why are we going through this? Why are we being persecuted for my identity, for my race, for who I am? What is the difference between me and my friend who's across the street from me? You can see that for him, that was a really turning point for him as a teenager, that he actually became ashamed of being Jewish and ashamed of being who he was. And also you could see that being afraid.
Yeah.
And for his life, and we're talking about 1941 when the slaughter of Jews was starting all over Europe. So, and my great-grandfather was also beaten up by anti-Semitic organization and ended up dying from his wounds. So we have here really in 1941 with the defense of the bill for defense of the nation. You see how my family is. The tin shop was taken away from my family. My grandfather Nisim, he's not able to participate in his youth group, Zionist youth group. He's not able to do his bar mitzvah. His bar mitzvah was canceled, and also my great grandfather passes away. So there's a lot of things happening during this time. It's really a turning point for the Jewish people, and it sadly gets a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
So it must have seemed hopeless. I mean, after that bill was signed, you could just imagine how that would have felt. I mean, the absolute terror. There were not everyone was for this. Like it passed Parliament, the Tsar signed it, but a lot of people were against it. You know, all the doctors wrote a statement and so forth, right? And one of the groups that was against it was the church, which I'm very thankful for. There were places where the church caved to the Nazis. at least the organizational church. But in Bulgaria, they really stood up, and not just Metropolitan Stefan, but Kirill and Plovdiv and these other guys we all went to bat for the Jewish people. And that's, I love that. But it was not clear that they were going to be able to accomplish anything, because it was just like they kept running up against the wall, right? But there's this thing that happened. I mean, maybe a hope spot, right? A spot of hope in 1943. And you call it the miracle of March 9th, 1943. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, I can definitely. I can tell you that even before March, in the 9th of March, 1943, throughout the whole war, what's significant is that the church did not stay silent. The church was vocal. They were active. They did not stop for a second to fight for the Jewish people and for them. You see it all through the Bill of Defense of the Nations when it was first brought before Parliament, and also later with the authorization law, where the government could do whatever they wanted to do, and the commissariat was also obliged, and the Jewish people had to have the yellow star, and all these things. You think throughout, even though it looked kind of helpless, the church never stopped to say its voice and was completely active. And I can tell you that throughout this whole time, you can read their protocols of the Orthodox Church. And the protocols are actually the ones that made me sob at certain points, because you're reading these protocols from 1941, 1942, and 1943, and you're seeing how they all are saying that we cannot close our doors to the Jewish people, because our job as Christian is to be a light to the Jewish people. How can we do that with closed doors? Our job as the church is to provoke the Jew to jealousy. Yeah. How can we do this if we're not helping them, if we're closing our doors and we're not doing whatever is possible to bless and protect them? And as it says in the Bible, we'll bless those who bless you. We have to bless the Jewish people and stand with them for this time. And they also say, like, how can we, in such a time as this, not stand with our Jewish people? Who knows that by us standing with them and even willing to risk our lives, the Jewish people will see their Messiah. And I'm telling you, and they even go as far as even quoting Romans 11 in this as well, of the one new man and having the Jewish people part of them. And you read this, and I extremely encourage the Christians around the world to read these protocols, because the time that we're set is just an example to us of how the one new man and how the church can rise up and stand with the Jewish people and during difficult times. And for me, I remember looking at all these protocols, and they never gave up. Even though it seemed like it was getting worse, the church never gave up. The Christians never gave up. The leaders were unanimously together, signed all these protocols and all these petitions to the king, to the government, and never let it, never stopped doing what they could do in order to save the Jewish people. So it's the 9th of March miracle in 1943 is not by accident, because you have to look at all the years that came before and their fight before. So what happens in the March 9th, 1943 is considered the first deportation attempt of the Bulgarian Jews. There was a signed agreement beforehand that Bulgaria was going to give 20,000 Jews from Bulgaria, and 12,000 were supposed to come from inside Bulgaria. And they already had the plans. They already knew that they already gathered some of the Jews in a city called Plovdiv and Kostandil and certain areas. They already put them in schools and locked them up. And everything was in motion for them to be deported. And their destination, as we know it, was probably Treblinka, the death camp, and most of the Jews that got there were killed. Everything was prepared. But what happens? In Plovdiv, for example, the Metropolitan of Plovdiv was called Kirill. And he saw that his Jewish members of his town were being collected and put in a school. He immediately got up. He ran to the school. The people, the police at the school were trying to stop him, saying, "No, you don't need to go. This is only for Jewish people." And he told them, "Try and stop me." He jumps over the fence.
Wow.
And I actually heard this testimony from a woman who was there in the school. So I heard it from a first-hand person. She was a little girl, and she told me she saw him literally with his, gown, jumping over, and he wasn't young, jumping over to the fence and telling her and a few other Jewish people who were in the courtyard in the school, he says, "Where you go, I will go."
Chills.
Yeah.
It says, "And wherever happens to you is going to happen to me." And he said, "I will lay on the train tracks for this train not to move. You will not deport my Jews from the city outside of Bulgaria." And he sent a letter to the King Boris, and he demanded that he set the Jews free. And this is only one city. We also know that in the same time, Metropolitan Stefan in Sofia, with Rabbi Daniel Zion, pleaded the king to release the Jews, that no Bulgarian Jew would leave the country. And praise God, this verdict was revoked. And actually, it was a matter of 4 hours difference between life and death for these Jewish people, because 4 hours before they were supposed to be sent, the order for canceling the deportation came, and the Jews were released from the schools, were released from the places that they were held, and they went back home. It's a total miracle from God. But I believe it's because there were influential people like Kirill, like Stefan, like Daniel Zion, who did whatever they could in order to stop the deportation of these Jews.
Yeah.
It sounds like they definitely understood what was happening, and that their morals, their faith, the strength from God, thank God, was something that played a role here. And their work together, it sounds like, was of the utmost importance. This coming together, these years of building relationship and these years of Christians standing with the Jewish people is something that was so influential here. It's quite inspiring. It's quite inspiring for today as well.
I think, if we had Christians like that, true believers in Europe, in other countries, who would have stood with the Jewish people and fought with them against all those laws and all this killing of the Jews, murdering the Jews, how many Jews we could have saved in Europe if we had the churches and the leaders of those churches standing with the Jewish people, like they did in Bulgaria.
Yeah, that's one of those what if questions that you think these actions of these people and their undying resolve to stand with the Jewish people and to approach leaders and to physically be there in that space, hearing that story about, this woman being in this school and seeing Kirill come and talking about where you go, I go is biblical, incredible.
Yeah. To have the moral compass to resist all the propaganda is a skill I'm looking for more people to develop today as well.
Amen. Amen. So later in 1943, the anti-Semitic persecution really hits your family, maybe even harder than it had up to that point, which is crazy to think. And they had to leave their homes from Sofia. Tell us a bit more about what that looked like.
In May 1943, it's considered the time where the second attempt for the deportation of the Bulgarian Jews. And there were two plans that were brought before the king. One was a plan that they would be sent directly from Sofia and also from Bulgaria to the death camps outside of Bulgaria. And the second one was that they can go to the provinces and then later on be sent to the death camps. King Tzar, or King Boris, he said no to the first one, and he decided to go with the second. So they decided to send deportation notices to the different families in Sofia to send them to the different provinces around. Again, this was in order to maybe later on be able to gather them and send them send them in trains outside of the country.
Right.
So this deeply affected my family, because my family received a deportation notice, and they had to go to the area of Plovdiv. By this time, my grandfather Nisim, he was around 15 years old. Both of his older brothers were already in work camps, so they were not around. He remembers going to the synagogue because Rabbi Zion declared a day of prayer and fasting. It was the 24th of May, 1943. He remembers being so much full of despair. At this point, they already know there was one attempt, and now it looks like there's another attempt, and it doesn't seem there's any hope. He really was discouraged at this point. And he remembers Rabbi Zion getting up on the stage and saying, you know, put your trust in the Rock of Israel, put your trust in God, that no matter what happens, we're in his hands. The speech that he made really impacted my grandfather. And so when his whole family they left Sofia, they had to leave their home and leave all their belongings. They only had whatever they could carry. On the way there, my great-grandmother, Sophie, looked at my grandfather and the other brother called David and said, run to the forests. I don't know that the place that we're going to near Plovdiv is even safe for us. And I think the safest point right now is for you and your brother to run to the forests and join the partisans.
Wow. Can you imagine?
And, you know, for me, I'm a mother myself, and I can't imagine how that was for a mother to send her two boys, teenager boys, and thinking that was the best way of survival for them was to send them off in such a time and join the partisans. So my grandfather, age 15, joined the partisans in the forces of Plovdiv and basically fought the Nazis when he was 15 years old.
Nice.
What's amazing is that, again, he told us a story that he was very hungry during this time. There was not a lot of food. But he remembers there were Christians in Plovdiv that would give them food, and that's how they were able to survive, especially the bad winters in Bulgaria. And, you know, he remembered that those Christians risked their lives in order to give them food for them to survive. So that was another, even a personal example, how Christians made a difference for my family.
So they join the partisans and they're living in the forest. They're surviving with this help from Christians who are helping feed them. But how are they getting along? How long are they doing this for? What happens to them while they're in these forests?
So what we know is that my grandfather, he was a teenager boy. He was 15 years old. He was there from May of 43 all the way to the end of World War II. So all the way to 1944, September of 1944, when the communists came in. My grandfather didn't really want to talk about the partisans. I think it was a very traumatic experience for him. It was very hard for him to talk about it. We do have a family story that we shared also in our book, that we were one time sitting in a restaurant and we were ordering some appetizers, and one of the appetizers happened to be mushrooms. And once my grandfather saw that, he just lost it. And people who know my grandfather, he was the most sweetest, like lovey-dovey, grandfather you can imagine. But for him to really get upset really meant something. And so we asked him what happened, and then he unfolded his story where him and another friend were looking for food, and then all of a sudden they found these mushrooms in the forest. And so my grandfather said he would look out, and the other friends started eating them. Well, it turns out those mushrooms were poisonous, and his friend died right in front of him. And so he was very traumatized by that. He was so discouraged by this time, and he even thought of maybe even eating the mushrooms himself, because he felt like there was no hope for our people, that this was going to be how his life was going to remain, hiding in the forests and being hungry the rest of his life. And he said that he really thought of his family, he thought of his mother, he thought of his brothers, And then he also remembered a conversation he had with Rabbi Daniel Zion. Rabbi Zion used to walk around with a ring. It had Aleph, 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 the letters Aleph in Hebrew. And it's for Emunah, Emet, and Ahavah. In English, it's truth, faith, and love.
Yeah.
And he remembered that at one point in the war, he asked Rabbi about that. And Rabbi Zion told my grandfather that those words have always given him comfort, even in the worst of days. And so he actually said that in that moment, and I believe it was just God just reminding him that memory, that he remembered that, and he remembered those three words, faith, trust, and love. And that what, in the end, kept him through, and he decided that he was going to fight until the rest of the war and survive and do whatever he could in order to survive.
I can also tell you that as I grew up in Jaffa, Tel Aviv, Israel, at home we never had mushrooms. I remember that. We never had mushrooms at home, and I never knew why until this happened. And then my dad told us, and I realized that's why we never allowed mushrooms into our home.
Yeah, we never had mushrooms when he was around.
It's kind of crazy to think about our parents having experiences before they were our parents, right? And he's just a teenage boy experiencing these incredibly traumatic situations, fighting for his life and being separated from his family and living off of what they can find in the forest. And that's, wow, that's crazy.
You talked about that ring that sort of embodied the philosophy that seems to have kept Daniel Zion going. I mean, just to read about him, he's just like this tireless engine, right? Like he's writing letters, he's talking to people. He makes such a stir. And we talked about this when we had Brian Reed on the podcast, who read our book about Daniel Zion. But all of the stuff that he did, handing letters out and just like banging on the Tsar's doors, and like just whoever would listen to him, he would talk to. And he just never gave up. And he got like fired, but as the rabbi, sort of like official, like he was still the spiritual leader, but they were like, they're distancing themselves from Daniel Zion because they think he's going to get him in trouble. He just nothing could bring him down. And I remember like reading about him in Somovit because eventually it got to the point where the Bulgarian Jews were being put in camps, and Daniel Zion was in a camp. And the stories of him in the camp are like, he's praying all the time, and he's encouraging people. He's sharing his stuff with people. He's like reading books, and he's giving little speeches about how suffering is great for spiritual development.
Yeah.
And he was like, he had more joy in that concentration camp than I have at my birthday party, right?
Yeah.
So how was that the secret? Like what kept him going through all of that? Like I would have gotten depressed.
In my opinion, I think Rabbi Zion was an incredible person. He was raised for that time, that even in the most worst circumstances, remained there, the leader of the Jewish people, and did whatever he could, even with no rights and no way to even be in control of what he ate or where he slept or anything. He did whatever he could in order to help his brethren, his Jewish brethren. For me, it was amazing about also his prayer commitment. I could just imagine how tired he was and probably frustrated, but he took the time and he made sure that he prayed every day and took time with the Lord, whatever little time that he had. And I remember there's a story from his family that I heard that in the camp, they only allowed 100 grams of bread per person per day in the camp.
Yeah.
And he saw how much his friends and the Jewish people were starving in the camp. And so he decided to take that up in prayer. And the next day it was 200 grams per day. And then it was 300. And then it was 400. And then you see it got to 500 grams. Because he continued praying for this, whatever he could. And I know that there were some lectures that they talked about being thankful. Being thankful is hard and unnatural circumstances. Being thankful that piece of bread that you got each day. Thankful that you woke up in the morning. Thanking God in the midst of this dark pit. And for me, it just really shows what an optimistic, courageous man full of faith in God, that doesn't matter what was around him or what circumstances were around him, he sustained in his faith and trust and love towards God and also to his fellow man.
And also we do know last years where he lived here in Jaffa in Tel Aviv, and that he used to just to worship. He used to sing scriptures to the Lord. And even his family said there was such like an awe on him. He would just, they said, we cannot understand, but he just worshiped and sang to the Lord. That was his last years, that's what he did.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you can look at him as a real person, not just as a historical character, and understand that he had to make these decisions every day to be grateful to God and to continue to help others, which is something that always helps in the midst of a hard time, right? To help others gives you sort of this extra boost. And that's pretty incredible that we can take his example and apply it today.
As someone who does a lot of research, you've gone and you've dug up a lot of facts, but then there's the next level sort of thing where you have to say, was someone good or bad? What were they thinking? And the Tsar Boris character is a real question mark for me, because having read Brian Reed's biography and having read Legacy of Hope, your wonderful book, I think you guys have different opinions on the Tsar. And his actions were so like opaque that it's like, what was his goal? What was he trying to like? Was he trying to go to bat for the Jews, or like what was he going to deport them? Like if he could, or like what? So tell me, what do you think of the Tsar? What's your opinion of the Tsar? What was he? Who is this guy?
Yeah. I can tell you that in Israel, I've interviewed many, many professors just on the whole issue of Tzar Boris, because I know especially in Israel, it's very controversial. There's people who are very anti Tzar Boris, and then there's ones who think, no, he's the one that delivered in everything. So when I was going through this research, I was really trying to give a balance between all these spectrums and all these different opinions. When it comes down to it, my personal belief, I believe he was like a joker in a card game. Meaning that in one way, you see him as a person that was pro-Nazi Germany. He was he put people in influence in the government that were pro-Nazi Germany, that he became part of the Third Reich, that he had good relationships with Adolf Hitler, that he met with him, he spoke German himself, that he made a few anti-Semitic speeches publicly. We also know that he's the one that signed the decree to deport the deportation of the Jews. But then you see this other side of him where he's in a meeting with Adolf Hitler and Ribbentrop, another minister in his government, and he's kind of like going this back and forth conversation with him, trying to tell them that his Jews in Bulgaria are different because they're Sephardic Jews. They're not the Ashkenazi Jews that you know in Germany. And trying to show him that they're not problematic Jews. My Jews are different kind of talk.
Wow.
And he also does this whole thing of making work camps, saying to the Nazi Germans, oh, no, I need my Jews to build infrastructures, to build roads, to build for the trains. I need their work and me, so that's why I can't deport them right now. Bulgaria is not a democratic country at World War II. We have a king, and nothing goes unseen or undone without the authority of the king. So the king knows everything that's going on, and you see how he's trying to maneuver this thing that's going on. In one way, he's an ally to Nazi Germany, but he's not giving them everything that they want. And one of them is the Jews of Bulgaria. And you cannot just oversee that, because you can see in the end, it was him who there's a book, a very famous book by a professor called Michael Barzal. In Hebrew, it's the Beyond Hitler's Grasp.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
There he says, he says that the decision to revoke or cancel or delay the First Deportation in the 9th of March was from the highest authority. Who is the highest authority in Bulgaria in 1943? It's the king. It's the King Bolis.
Sure.
So it couldn't be anybody else but him. He's the one who canceled that decree. I could tell you one thing that was very encouraging for our family during writing this book is that we were actually able to meet face-to-face with King Simeon II. He's the son of King Boris III in Bulgaria, in the palace in Sofia, Bulgaria. It was one of my highlights, you could say, in writing this book. I remember sitting there and we decided as a family, we decided to give them a gift to Simon II on behalf of our family. We gave him like an artwork with a runic blessing to him. And we presented this gift to him, and we want to say thank you to your family because we're here and we're alive today. And we later got a message saying that gift has found its place in the palace, in this palace in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Nice.
One thing that I also remember that I asked him, I said, why do you think the Bulgarian Jews were saved during World War II? And his answer really surprised me. What he answered to me, he said, it was God.
Wow.
As simple as that. And I really believe it was God because I can't see any other, a reason where in a small nation that's allied with the Third Reich, here you have a Messianic rabbi and the church rising up, that these Jews were spared and saved. It could only be if God was in all of this.
Yeah.
There are leaders that recognize Daniel Zion's role in saving the Bulgarian Jewry and also the connection to the Christians in Bulgaria as well, as we've already touched on. And I just kind of want to ask us, we're in this situation here in Israel that's very challenging. Most of our listeners understand what's going on and are connected to what's happening here and the war that we're in right now. But I kind of want to ask you all, from the inspiration that you've received from the Christians who partnered with the Jews during the time of the Holocaust, what lessons for today can we learn from the example of the Metropolitan Stefan, and how can that inspire us today?
Today, Israel, we are in a war. We're in a war with Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah and all these terrorist organizations like ISIS that they want one thing, to eliminate Israel from the map. And we are fighting an evil war. It's a spiritual warfare and a physical as well.
Yeah.
I believe more than ever, God is calling the Christians to stand with righteousness. What a beautiful way to say, we stand with Israel, we stand with the God of Israel in such a time as this, and we support Israel in such a time as this. And we are against the evil one who wants to eliminate the Jewish people. But some Christians say, well, it's nothing to do with us. We are from America, we are from Europe, we are from Asia, Well, one thing people don't understand, that the Islamic jihadists, they believe that they need to convert all the infidels. And if they don't convert, then they deserve death. And they specifically, they pray this in the mosques. They will get those who pray on Shabbat, the Jews who pray on Shabbat, the Sabbath, and then we'll go and get those who pray on Sunday, the Christians. So it's very clear that we live in a time that we see darkness, evil darkness monster that wants to come against the word of God, come against with lies, against the truth. And I believe this is the time that believers, Christians, born-again believers from all over the world, need to stand with the truth, stand with Israel, and share that Yeshua is the only way, the truth, and the life, and to stand with the Jewish people, with the God of Israel. We can learn from Metropolitan Stefan, Metropolitan Kirill, how they stood with Rabbi Daniel Zion, and together they prayed and stood against the evil one.
So for me, this story is really a moving story that the Jewish people first can really learn from it. Because here we have an Orthodox rabbi who was also a believer in Yeshua. And what he did was extraordinary, what he did to saving the Jews of Bulgaria. And one way he was Jewish, he did not lose of any part of his identity as a Jewish person, as an Orthodox Jew. And at the same time, whatever he did it because of his beliefs in the Messiah of Israel. And it was a light in the midst of this dark time. And then it's also a story for the people who are not Jewish, because here you have Metropolitan Stefan, you have an entire church that rose up again and again, even if it looked at the beginning helpless and that they were not getting anything, their voice wasn't being heard, but they never for 1 second stopped. And in the end, you have Rabbi Daniel Zion and the Metropolitan Stefan and the church together rescuing 50,000 Jews from destruction and winning the evil one, Hitler. They were able to save these Jews from the hands of the Nazis, the hand of Hitler. And it's a remarkable and an amazing story that needs to be told and heard. Because, if we don't learn what happened and where we've been through, we're not going to be able to know how to learn for it for the future. And what happened in Israel on the 7th of October, there are so many parallels to what happened that 1 or 2 days in this nation to what happened in the Holocaust. And even in my circles that I've been through, there's been so many things that people have gone back to what happened in the Holocaust. And, a lot of unbelievers, Israelis have told me, they've asked me, they said, where is the church's voice? Where are the Christians that are going to stand behind the Jewish people? And I told them, I know there are Christians who are going to stand with Israel. They're going to stand with the Jewish people. This is really a story to show practically and spiritually in every way possible how the church can rise up and stand with the nation of Israel and with the Jewish people for such a time as this. And I think it's also important for us to remember all those ones who risked their lives in order to save people, save the Jewish people. And this is where Rabbi Daniel Zion comes. I think it's also the people that gave their lives for saving lives on the 7th of October. And I think it's also part of our society here in Israel to commemorate and collaborate those heroes who did whatever they could in order to save lives. Because that's what's important to us, is the preservance of life. For me, I just want, my heart is that people will read this story, and know this story of Metropolitan Stefan of the church and Rabbi Daniel Zion, and pass it on for generations to come, that it will never get lost in the books.
As Jews, right, we have this kind of collective history inside of our blood, inside of our DNA. And when an event like October 7th and things that have happened since then happen, it throws us back very quickly, and for good reason, to what happened during the Holocaust. Because, as you're talking, we're talking about propaganda, we're talking about lies, we're talking about evil people that are coming to destroy and have stated outright that their goal is to destroy the Jewish people. The parallels are uncanny. They're frustrating. I know there's a lot of frustration to feel like this could be something just 70 years later that feels like it's coming back around. And what you're saying here and what we're seeing, of course, the spiritual battle that's going on that Avi spoke about with this nasty spirit to destroy the Jewish people. And maybe at the time during the Holocaust, this wasn't a popular cultural or political opinion to hold, as a Christian or as the leader of the church. And who knows if Stefan and Kira were putting really their own reputation on the line to stand with the Jewish people, even though they were less than 1% of the population in Bulgaria, like you're saying. And they could have gone with the other 90-something% that was already, turning, and they didn't. And we see how important that is today to stand with the Jewish people, and the blessings we know will come, whether it's in this life or the world to come. We know that they'll be there for those who bless Israel, because of the verse you quoted before from Genesis. So praise God for the Christians who are standing with us today, and for the non-Jews who are standing with us today. And I pray that there would be even more of a spirit of determination to stand with the people of God, and to come alongside us and recognize that, you could be throwing yourself over fronts and saying, I'm standing with you, or you could be lying on a train track, or you could be, there's so many things that could be happening here. You could be coming and volunteering or donating, or just being in prayer for Israel against the spiritual and physical battle going on. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now, the people who we've talked mostly about, right, they're your ancestors, they're your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and they were in Bulgaria. And how now today we're talking to you in Israel here. How did you end up here in Israel? What did that whole transition look like?
Yeah, you see, after the Second World War, my dad, Nissim, he joined the youth movement, Jewish youth movement. They decided to make Aliyah. So in 1947, as a young man, he took a ship from Europe to come to, at that time, Palestine. The British mandate was in charge here. Of course, the British made the laws that they can have just a certain amount of Jews coming into Israel, and most of the Jews were not allowed in. So he was caught by the seashores of Tel Aviv.
Oh, gosh.
And he was taken with the ship, with the British ship Navy, to Cyprus. And my father was in detention camp in Cyprus from 1947 to 1948. And he was waiting for the day. All he could do is pray, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. So all he was waiting and praying that he can come to Israel. So after the Declaration of Independence, May 14, 1948, there was, of course, war. The war broke, the Independence War, the War of Independence. And then he was waiting for the ships to come from Israel to Cyprus to pick him up and bring him. As soon as he got here, he was so excited. He's back home. He's been waiting for this, we can say, for 2,000 years.
Literally.
And he was so happy. The moment he landed in the land, he wanted to kiss the land. He was so happy. And the Jewish agencies say, Baruch haba, welcome home. Okay, here's a gun, go and fight.
Gosh.
And right there, the same day, he joined the Israeli army, the IDF, and joined and fought the Independence War as a young man.
Imagine, it's mind-blowing. We're listening to a story that happened decades ago. But if you think about this, right now, this guy, he was a teenager, he survives. Thank God the war is over, and he gets on a boat. He's like, let's go to Israel. And he stopped there again. It's like one thing after another. And then, seeing the shores of Tel Aviv and just wanting to get to this promised land, right? Wanting to get this promised land. And then the British, who were also this back and forth situation at the founding of Israel, right? We see that too. Then he's sent to a detention camp, and it's like, what now? But it sounds like there's, to me, this kind of eternal hope that is just springing forth from inside of him. This understand, like, I'm going to get there. And then he does. And the second he's welcomed, he's thrown into the army. Like, it's just mind blowing to think what's happening through his teenage years and early 20s for him to come to Israel and successfully not just survive, but thrive and have a family such as yourself. And it's beautiful to see this unwavering spirit of the Jewish people to return to the land of Israel, and to see that in your family through the story of the Bulgarian Jewry. So that is just absolutely inspirational.
It's amazing that you say hope, because one of the things that he told us is that he used to have tears in his eyes when he talked about it. He talked about when the British found this immigrated ship, and they had to move to that British ship to go to Cyprus. And they're so close to the shores of Israel, but they're going to Cyprus, the other direction. And so simultaneously, they decide to sing Hatikva, the hope, that later became our national anthem. And I always remember him talking about, singing the Hatikva, looking at the shores, but knowing he can't get there. And that hope that sustains him of that 2,000 years of hope that we're going to come back to the land that God promised us. And then he does. And then the first thing he does is to fight, but that hope is still within him.
Yeah. And who knows if that was planted in his spirit by the Rabbi Daniel when he's talking about Emunah, faith being a huge part of his survival. And that's just incredible. Wow.
Well, what a fitting title for the book then, Legacy of Hope.
That's it.
You can buy it anywhere that you can buy any book. Go get Legacy of Hope, Hidden Heroes from Generation to Generation. A fascinating story. And like you said, just miracle after miracle. God put Daniel Zion and Metropolitan Stefan and others in the exact position to save 50,000 Bulgarian Jews from the Holocaust. Our guests today, Avi Mizrachi, Devorah, thanks for joining us and for telling us your story, your family's story, and Rabbi Daniel Zion's story.
Toda raba. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're so looking forward to seeing you soon here in Jerusalem. We're hosting an event here at the Brahms Center and to tell this story here in Jerusalem in Hebrew and discuss this. And I know I'm personally so excited to see what this is going to look like. And we're hosting that event on Erev Yom HaShoah, which is the evening of Holocaust remembrance. We're excited to see you there. All of you guys overseas, I know you're jealous that you can't join, but maybe next time you're in Jerusalem, you can come on over and join us for these kinds of events. So we look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Amen.
Amen.
And listen, if people would like to get our book,
Will be definitely a blessing for us. This book is also available in Hebrew and in Israel for our own people, and we're very, very excited. So any book that we're able to sell overseas, we're able to give here in Israel. So thank you very much for helping us with this.
Incredible. Yeah, we'll be happy to link those, of course, down in the description so that everyone will know how to get a hold of your book and how to, follow your ministry and see what you guys are doing here in Israel. So much, much appreciated for your time.
Toda. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us today on Messiah Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about the Jewish Jesus, check out First Fruits of Zion at ffoz.org. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. Messiah Podcast is made possible by the generosity of our First Fruits of Zion friends. FFOZ friends are people like you who support our mission and get loads of exclusive Bible commentary, teaching, and content. You can join today at ffoz.org. Tune in next time for more great conversations. Until then, I'm Jacob Franzak. Shalom.
Let his word cover you and me, like the waters cover the sea. Let his love cover you and me, like the waters cover the sea.